Well, hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. Getting set for episode 82 already of Mike in the Midwest. So sit back and here we go. We're talking about geography today. And I promise it won't be too boring. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to episode number 82 of Mike in the Midwest, a mini podcast for the great patrons of the Be Our Guest podcast, just like you. Today is Thursday, January 20th, 2022, and I hope this show finds you being awesome as you are. I hope it's outstanding for you. I hope you're healthy. I hope you're safe. I hope you're happy. I hope you're having a productive week, no matter what your profession. I hope that it's awesome. I really do. I hope you're having a great week and that you're looking forward to a fun weekend. Of course, if you're a football fan, you got a lot of playoff football coming your way with the NFL. If you're a cold weather fan, you got a lot of cold weather here in most parts of the United States. If you're a fan of snow and ice, I hope you live in South or North Carolina, right there along the coast, because I think they're going to get it this weekend. So, wherever you are, I hope you're having a great time with your friends and your family. We're just chugging away through January. I think of January and February as kind of some of the most boring months of the year. You just got to make it through. And then if we can make it to March, the weather starts to churn here in the Midwest. Baseball starts to come back, which is a big thing. It kind of makes the whole kind of transition from winter to spring a little bit more tolerable. You get to maybe get out the grill a little bit at the end of March, and then spring hits us around April here in the Midwest, and things start to look good again. But right now, it's we've made it through the better part of January. We still got a little ways to go with the very cold weather. We'll talk about that here today as we speak all about geography and the geography of where you grew up and how that maybe shaped how you see the world. So we're going to talk about that here in just a minute. But before we do that, here on Mike in the Midwest, I like to recap what has been going on in my life over the past week since we got back together last time. And of course, a couple of weeks ago, I was down for Marathon Weekend 2022. We talked about that last week. Great time. I've been easing back into my training runs. I figure I don't have any big races on the agenda right now, so no reason to have to get out there and kill myself on the treadmill for a while. I actually took a few days off, which was very nice. Slept in for me, which was really pretty unheard of. I'm an early bird and I like to get up and run, but I decided that I would just kind of ease back in. So I'm just adding a half a mile each morning. This mile I got back up this morning. I got back up to 7.5 miles. So I'll just kind of inch up and no hurry. My next big race, I think, will be St. Patrick's Day. I'm kind of eyeing a half marathon here in Creve Coeur, Missouri, which is about 5 minutes down the road. I ran that one for fun a few years back. It's at a park here near our house called Creve Coeur Park. And it actually runs out of St. Louis County, runs into our county, which is called St. Charles County. You go across the Missouri River and back. And I actually somehow ran my best ever half marathon time on that course about 4 years ago. It was the day that, it was 2020. So it was only a couple of years ago, I guess. It was the day that the world shut down really for us. It was the day we were celebrating my wife's birthday. So her birthday is March 4th. And we were having her birthday party with our family at my in-laws' house, my wife's parents' house. We were all going out for lunch and having cake, and we picked up a pizza on the way out. And that's where she was getting her gifts from her parents. And, we're doing all that stuff. Her sisters were meeting us there. But I remember that was kind of the day that everything started to go virtual. She found out from school that they were looking at, doing remote learning, which we had no idea what that looked like at that point. But that morning, I ran that race. And it was crazy because I ran it really fast. And the only reason I ran it fast was because it started at like 10 in the morning. And we had to be out at her parents' house at like 12:30. So I had to run kind of quickly because I had to get back home and get a quick shower so we could head out to the in-laws. I didn't want to get in trouble, especially on my wife's birthday, because I was running a race on her birthday. So I ran it pretty quick and I got a PR. So I'm going to try to get out there on that course again. It's very flat. And again, it's nice to have a race instead of it being 15 hours from home. It's 5 minutes down the road, and I drive past the little running path that it's on every single day. So we'll see how that goes. And it's super cheap too. And you get a jacket, you get a beer. I don't drink beer, but you get this cool glass that the beer comes in, and a cookie at the finish. I definitely do eat cookies. So it is pretty nice. And you see people from your town, right? You never Well, I love seeing all of our lizards at Walt Disney World. It's kind of fun to see, people that you know from St. Louis in these races too. So I will probably run that one. If you're in St. Louis or Missouri or Illinois, maybe look at that one. It's the St. Patty's Day half marathon. It's Creve Coeur Park. It's a pretty cheap race, and I'd love to race with you. It'd be kind of fun. It's usually around, I think it's around the first weekend of March, St. Patrick's Day themed. Anyway, that's my next run. So I'm kind of taking it easy. Last weekend, though, instead of running, we went out of town again, but we went to Indianapolis for JamFest, Super Nationals for cheerleading. That is one of the competitions that we travel to every year for Mallory's cheerleading squad. Didn't have the best weekend ever. We got third place out of 12 teams in our division, so it wasn't a disaster. But we, didn't win. We've won that one in the past. And again, the goal, if you're new to all this, is that if you win one of these competitions, you get a bid to the summit, and you want to go to the summit, which is the biggest. It's kind of like the World Series of cheerleading. It takes place at Walt Disney World. This year, it's going to take place the last weekend of April, the first week of May at ESPN Wide World of Sports at the Arena, which, if you don't know which building that is the building where the Run Disney merchandise was sold this past marathon weekend. It's that first building to your right as you enter the complex. So we are still chugging along. This weekend, we're in another competition. This one is again. Luckily, this one's closer to home. This one is right along the path for the race I'm going to run in March. It's called the Family Arena. It's 5 minutes down the way. And we'll see what we do here. It's a smaller competition, so we have a better chance to win, which is good. And then we'll be heading to places like Schaumburg, Illinois, which is up by Chicago. I think we have one more up in the Dells, Wisconsin. I think we're going back up that way before the year's over if we haven't secured a bid. The thing is, we keep competing until we secure a bid. So the sooner we get that bid, the less travel we'll have to do around the Midwest, the Great Lakes, and I hope we get it soon, because it gets a little nerve-wracking toward the end if you don't have a bid, because you want to get to Walt Disney World because the summit is a pretty neat experience for the girls. So that's what we did. It was kind of neat going again. This competition is held at the Indiana Convention Center, which, if you don't know what that is, that's the big complex in downtown Indianapolis, Indiana. It's attached to the Lucas Oil Stadium, which is where the Colts play. And earlier that week, there was a little college football game there called the National Championship game between the Alabama Crimson Tide and the Georgia Bulldogs, which unfortunately Georgia won. But it was kind of cool to be in that complex. I mean, it is gigantic. And we stayed in a hotel that was attached to the convention center, so you didn't have to ever go outside, which was nice because it snowed while we were there. It was super cold while we were there. We parked the car when we got there on Friday night. We did not get the car back out until Sunday night when we left. And it had like little skywalks where you could walk from your hotel over to the convention center rooms where they performed, and you never had to go outside. And there were restaurants that were connected to the hotel, to the convention center. So it was really nice. You never, ever did go outside, which was great. And in our hotel was actually, it used to be the Union Station, apparently for Indianapolis. So it used to be a train station in like the 1930s and 40s. And it was converted into a hotel. And they did something similar here in St. Louis downtown. We have a Union Station. And actually, my wife and I, fun fact, I should tell this story on the podcast maybe sometime in more detail. But the night we got engaged, I'll save that story. Maybe next week I'll tell that story. Or maybe Valentine's Day. I don't know if I've told it. I'll save it because it's a pretty fun story about how I asked Pam to marry me. And I still can't believe she said yes, but it was a pretty cool day. I had a whole thing lined up, and we did a cool thing. It has to do with kind of where we stayed this past weekend. But anyway, the hotel we stayed in used to be, it was called Union Station in Indianapolis. It used to be a train station, and you could actually stay in these old train cars were some of the rooms. Now, our room was just a regular hotel room, but it looked down on these old train, like sleeper cars, and inside the sleeper cars were hotel rooms. So we didn't get to stay in one of those, but they were there, and it was a very cool looking hotel. Hard to get around because it had 3 levels. Didn't really have staircases. You had to take this central elevator everywhere, which is kind of inconvenient, but it was a kind of a cool little boutique hotel that used to be a train station. It was a lot of fun. So, suited the thing, and got to get out of the house in January, and Mallory got to cheer with her friends and had a good time, and got to have a pretty good pizza on Saturday night sitting in the hotel. We didn't really go anywhere because we're trying to keep everybody away from people as much as possible with all the competitions we have going on. It was freezing anyway. So, thanks to all. One of my listeners for the podcast sent me a huge list of restaurants to go to in Indy. Unfortunately, we never left the convention center because we were trying to keep the girls is kind of bubbled up as possible because we have competitions that weekend, this weekend coming up, the next weekend, and we're just trying to, keep everybody safe. But we will be back in Indiana. We go to Indiana quite often, and we will. I've starred that email, so I'm going to check out all all those restaurants because I'm all about that stuff. All right, so what is going on? Last weekend we talked about marathon weekend, or last week here on Mike in the Midwest. Let's hit the feedback real quick on last week's show. It was Marathon Weekend 22, the other stuff, and Madison and Zach Samples. They jump in here. Thank you very much for being patrons, guys. I appreciate it so very much. They say, hey, Mike, it was great seeing all the lizards over Marathon Weekend. We had a blast running our first marathon. Congratulations, you guys, and welcome to the club, marathoners. How does that sound? Isn't that the coolest thing ever? Like forever, for the rest of your life, you're a marathoner. When you're 85, you're going to be a marathoner. I just love that. Like, I can't believe I'm a marathoner. It's crazy. We're planning on doing our first Dopey challenge next year, since it'll be the 10th anniversary of Dopey, the 30th anniversary of the marathon, the 10th anniversary of the 10K, the 30th anniversary of the 5K, and the 100th anniversary of the Walt Disney Company. Clearly, the only option is to do them all and get all the medals. Can't wait for next year, and thank you for all you do. Well, thank you, Zach and Madison. I appreciate that. And I had no idea, other than the fact that next year's the 10th anniversary for Dopey, that any of those other milestones were happening at Marathon Weekend. Now you just gave me hives, because now I'm worried that it's going to be even harder than ever to register for Dopey. But yeah, I'll be in there. I've done 6 Dopies now, and so I'll be going for Dopey number 7. But the thing is, I don't get any younger somehow each year. Every year I'm a year older. So it seems like every year Dopey not only, I mean, it's always 48.6 miles, which is tough on Sunday, getting those last 26.2 in. But man, every year it's a little bit harder. So we'll see. We'll get there. The lizards are amazing. They get me there, but I'll be 49 next year. That's crazy. Sarah Wallner, thank you so much for being a patron. She jumps in here and says, hey, Mike, I've been listening to and enjoying all the Patreon episodes since the very beginning, and I'm finally getting around to leaving my first comment. Thanks, Sarah. We've been waiting for you, because I love the comments. Always jump in here and give me some comments. Thank you for all the bonus content you create each week, and for even more Marathon Weekend thoughts, which I currently can't get enough of. Guess what, Sarah? You're getting one more Marathon Weekend show this Monday with Marlessa. It was her first ever Run Disney event, so I wanted to get that take on it, because I've done so many of them. We talk about her very first experience with Run Disney. She did the 5K and the half marathon. We talk all about it on Monday. So you get one more. She says, I'm still struggling with the return to reality after such an awesome weekend. Same here, because the pictures are starting to dry up on social media finally. Like, they were there. Now they're starting to kind of go away. I'm having the exact same thing, Sarah. I also stayed at Pop for Marathon Weekend in the 80s building closest to the parking lot, and found the walk distance to race transportation to be perfect. Every step saved on Marathon Weekend counts. 100% correct there, Sarah. I also found the race transportation to and from Pop to be efficient and easy every day. Would highly recommend staying there on a race weekend. I'm so grateful to you, Pam and Ricky, for creating a space so comfortable it led to the best running team I have ever been a part of, the Lizards. I really enjoyed meeting so many people in person, and finally meeting you, and running some magical miles with new friends. The community you've built is the best I've ever encountered, and I'm so grateful to be a part of it. Well, Sarah, thank you so much. I mean, I've said this many times. It really doesn't have anything to do with me, Ricky, Pam, or Scott, or anybody that's really kind of behind the mic here. We have been 100% blessed that the right people kind of found us, and that the right people kind of found each other, surrounded by a love for Disney and a love for each other that has developed because of this podcast. We all have this, we're all Disney fans. So I think we have kind of a common outlook on life, which is very positive. If you're a Disney fan, you kind of believe in magic. You eternally hope that the good is always going to prevail. I think we always do. And I mean, like I said, I'm 48 years old. I still plan on doing Dopey again next year at 49. Some people in the real world, start to think that 49 is old, and like, you shouldn't be doing silly things like running 48 miles. Like, that's for the 20 or 30 somethings. I don't think that. I think that you're only as young as, or as old as you allow your mind to tell your body it is. So I think we all have that in common. And I think that because of that, with a group like the Lizards and our whole podcast community, even beyond the Lizards, just listeners of the show, we support each other in so many ways. We help each other become better people. And don't worry. I mean, I've had struggles, and we've had a lot of listeners that have gone through some rough patches. This show's been going for almost 14 years. And I can tell you what, our listeners have carried me through some rough times, and I've seen our listeners help each other through some very, very rough times in their lives. And it's real. It's not like some virtual friendship. I mean, it's friendship and it's love all around, but the lizards especially, I'm just blessed to be one member of a group of, if you look at the Facebook group, it has 2,500 plus members. I'm just one of them I get a ton out of being a member of the Lizards, because when I'm out there running, I'm not the fastest, I'm not the slowest, I'm one of the oldest. And when you look at my pictures, I don't look like I know what I'm doing when I'm running, but man, do I love being out there and giving it my best try and having a go Lizards or go Mike when I'm out there from a friendly face. And like I met Sarah at Marathon Weekend, just getting to say hi. That means the world to me. I'm not the best. Like I get nervous when I meet people in person for the first time. But when somebody comes up and says that they listen to the podcast and that they enjoy the show, I mean, on the inside, it melts my heart, because I really do still picture myself sitting in my studio here in my basement in Missouri recording the show, but I don't realize that it goes out to people all over the country and all over the world. And the fact that you allow us in and that you support us here on Patreon, especially if you're hearing this show, it means more than you know, because the bills do add up. The show continues to grow each and every month. I look at the numbers. We gain listeners every month. We have over, almost, like I said, almost 14 years. It's amazing that there's still growth 14 years later, which shocks me. But when we have growth, the bills do keep getting bigger. And so they're bigger than they were back in 2008. And that's where the Patreon money goes to hosting and bandwidth and all kinds of stuff, so that the service is there, and there isn't a degradation in the speed that you download the shows and stuff like that. And I appreciate that. And I put it right back into the show. So thank you for supporting the show, but thank you for being a part of this community. Sarah, thank you for the kind words. I hope we're always there. I hope we always, three things. I hope we always share a few laughs each week. I hope we always share some fun memories. I mean, the memories we bring up might not be the same memories that you have, but I hope the memories we talk about on the podcast, either Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, sparks a memory with you of something that happened with you, your kids, your significant other, just a solo trip you took. If we talk about some crazy ride on the Barnstormer, I'm 6'3", I got wedged in. Maybe that reminds you of the time like you got stuck on, I don't know, the Maelstrom one day. I don't know, some related memory. And also maybe you get a tip or two that helps you have a better trip down the line. That's kind of my 3 goals of the podcast. All right, last comment, and then we'll get to today's topic. Ashley Meisel, I believe it is. Thank you so much for being a patron. Hey, Mike, love this episode. You crushed Dopey after being so sick. Thank you. Congratulations on the PR. I was cheering near the Skyliner station on Marathon Sunday and got to give you a shout out. You looked ready to tackle that last 5K. I was ready to tackle anybody on Sunday because it was so hot. And if you were at the Skyliner station, thank you for the shout out. I know you were there. I appreciate that, Ashley. I know my good buddy Reggie was there, Reggie Coachman. The Eileen and Dave Lawrence were there. I saw them as I cruised by. I was just so happy. I'm telling you what, there's no happy like Epcot happy on Marathon Sunday during Dopey. You're so glad to be at Epcot because I know I could walk the rest of the way in if I had to, but man, I was giving it everything I had at that point. I was so excited to be back at Epcot. I knew I just had to cruise through that park, grab a margarita, which the margarita stand was closed, so I didn't get a margarita till after the race, but hey, I knew I was there and I knew I could finish the race. Ashley, thank you for being there and for cheering. You do not know how much that means to somebody like me. Thank you. She also says thank you to BOGP and Patreon podcasts, both these podcasts and live call-in shows, which, by the way, I'm going to do on Sunday night. I think Scott will be available, so get ready to call us Sunday night. Have got me through these crazy pandemic times. I run regularly 3 to 4 times a week. The Lizards inspired me to do a Disney race again after a 10-year hiatus. I did the half marathon and also set a PR of 1 hour and 52 minutes. Holy cow, you were flying. The Lizards Cheer Squad is just amazing. Thank you for creating this community. Ashley, again, thank you for being a patron. Everything I just said about Sarah's comments, the community kind of built itself. We're just lucky to be a part of it. 152. Holy smokes. I've never run a half marathon that fast, ever. You're smoking. So congratulations on your PR, especially after a 10-year break. That's a decade. If I'm counting correctly, that's crazy. Good job, Ashley. Hey, you better be back in 2023. I got to cheer you. That's flying. All right, so let's talk real quick. We got about 10 or 15 minutes here about the topic that kind of hit my head. And I was wondering about this because every time I'm in Florida, if you're from the Midwest and you go to Florida in January, you're like, God, why are these people so much smarter than people like me that live in Missouri? Right. I mean, so let me just give you a little perspective as to why this show came about right now. Right now, outside my door here in St. Peters, Missouri, which is right outside of St. Louis, or I'm about 20 miles west of the Arch, one county over. Where yeah, the Arch is in St. Louis County. Actually, it's in St. Louis City, but then there's St. Louis County, and then to the west there's St. Charles County. That's where we live now. It's 7 degrees outside right now as I'm recording this podcast. 7, not 17, not 27. It's 7 degrees. The wind chill's below zero. And it's sunny out today. It's not snowing. It's not nasty. It looks beautiful outside. But it hurts to go outside. I took Riley out this morning to go for her walk. We take one lap around the little pond or the little lake every morning. We do one every afternoon. She does her business. That's kind of her place to take care of things. And I'm telling you what, like it hurt to just be alive out there. It was painful because the wind was blowing and it was cold. And I had on my good coat. I had on my what's that thing called? Like it's the Nike thing the football players wear. I wear it when I run outside. I never run outside anymore because I have a treadmill and I'm weak. But it's Balaclava or something. The big like it covers your whole head. The only thing out is your eye holes. I had that on. I had gloves. I had on a hood. I had on a stocking cap over that thing. I mean, I was like set. I looked like I should be in Siberia, and I was still freezing. So it got me to thinking about the geography of where you live really does kind of change your perspective on things, probably for your childhood. Because again, this show's kind of about memories from your childhood, but also kind of how you see the world later in life. And so as I grew up here in the Midwest, I didn't always live in St. Charles or St. Peters where I'm at right now, but I live close. We moved about 17 miles away from where I grew up as a kid. When I was a kid, I grew up in this town called Florissant. Again, 17 miles to the north of where I live now. So this was in St. Louis County, closer to downtown St. Louis, north of downtown St. Louis. So it was in North St. Louis County. But you got to remember where I live, this part of the country, and think about where you live, the geography of your area. So where I was basically in St. Louis, Missouri, we grew up around two major rivers. We have the Mississippi River, of course, to our east, which is the dividing line between the states of Missouri and Illinois, which as I grew up, the Mississippi River is the river you would see when you went down to watch a Cardinals game. Anytime you went to downtown St. Louis, of course, the city of St. Louis, where the Arch is, everything like that is on the Mississippi River. So anytime you went to downtown, or if you went over into Illinois for any kind of reason, you would always cross over the Mississippi River, which is probably, it's the most major river in the United States of America. So it was a big deal to see the Mississippi. But also, we have the Missouri River, which is not just, it's the Missouri River and we live in the state of Missouri, but it's also a major river in our country because it runs kind of through the upper Midwest. If you're going to Colorado, Nebraska, Iowa, you'll encounter the Missouri River. But the Missouri River is the dividing line between St. Louis and St. Charles counties. So I go across anytime I leave my house now, I cross the Missouri River daily. The Missouri River now is right down the road from where we live. So I lived in this little pocket basically growing up my entire life, basically just different parts, just different little areas in this bigger area where the Mississippi and the Missouri rivers had their confluence, pretty close to where these two rivers met. And growing up in Missouri, the history of the Louisiana Purchase and the Lewis and Clark expedition is heavily taught. So we learned all about Lewis and Clark and, 1804, the Louisiana Purchase, because that's how our state became a part of the United States of America. And St. Charles, Missouri, where I live now, was the launching point for Lewis and Clark to explore the Louisiana Purchase. And we have big monuments to them. There's a really cool, where I live in our county, there's a little, it's called Main Street, St. Charles. And if you ever come to where I live, there's an old area right on the Missouri River by my house that reminds me very much of Main Street USA at the Magic Kingdom. It's a bunch of Old refurbished buildings. There's candy shops, there's soda fountains, there's lots of restaurants, there's nightclubs, there's little places where you can make soaps. There's bookshops, there's ice cream parlors. It's just a little neat area. You can ride in horse-drawn carriages. You can rent bicycles. There's live entertainment in the summer and the winter. They have like streetmosphere characters at Halloween and at Christmas. It's a neat little area to go to, and it's really well developed right on the Missouri River. And if you're a Disney fan, you would love it. It's called Main Street St. Charles, and it's 5 minutes from our house. But that's the area where Lewis and Clark kind of set off on their expedition. But the thing is, as a kid, and this was just me, I was a nerdy kid. I was a different type kid. I love sports. I played baseball my entire childhood on lots of teams. Um, but I was also one who enjoyed getting good grades, and I also enjoyed just learning. I enjoyed being at the library and just diving into books. Like I think I've talked about this on the podcast. When I was a kid, our family, well, my dad always worked. He was a cement mason, so my dad was always out doing concrete work every day during the summer, but our family had a family pass to the community pool. We had like season passes because my mom didn't work. And so she would take my sister, who's 4 years younger than me, myself and her, we would go up to the pool that was across the way from our house, the little city pool called Bangert Park. But instead of going to the pool, I would always just go to the library, which was next door. And I would much rather sit in the air conditioning than be in the pool all day. And excuse me, just kind of pull out some books on like tornadoes or Disney or what have you. I just look at all kinds of books all day. And so that was me. But so where I grew up though, I was always wondering like what happened. And I still thought about this at our old house. Even we've lived at our new house now for a few years. But where I lived with Pam before we moved, because that was really close to where I grew up too, all in the same town of Florissant. When one year, about 10 years ago, she got me a hammock for the backyard for Father's Day. The girls got me a hammock, and I love that hammock. I still have it and I still use it. But I would lay out there in the summertime and just kind of, take an hour, hour and a half to just rest and kind of look up at the clouds, not be on my phone, and just think about things. And one of the things I would constantly think about at the old house is I would lay on my hammock because our old house was really close to the Missouri River. Different part than we are now, but we were really, really close to the Missouri River at our old house. Like we could ride our bikes like 3 or 4 blocks up and we were at the river. And I always wondered, like, before our houses were in that area, so before our subdivision was made, where we were, in our old house before we moved out here, like what was on this ground? Because this ground was so close to the Missouri River, and I know that it was very, very fertile land because it probably flooded. It was very accessible to the Missouri River. It was also a place where if you lived on this land, there was probably buffalo back in the day. Again, I'm a big Dances with Wolves movie person, so my imagination probably went wild even as a 40-year-old laying on my hammock. But I wondered, like, without the houses, like what was on this land in the 1600s, in the 1700s, in the 1800s? What did this land look like pre becoming suburban America? Like, I mean, I've wondered this, like, and I told this to my wife, and she was not really impressed because she's not the kind of mindset that I have. But I always told her, I said, I wonder if, like, Lewis and Clark maybe camped at night, like in our backyard, like in the land that is now our backyard. Did that happen? It's like, probably not. We aren't that close to the river. We're probably a half a mile from the river. I'm like, but it could have happened. They could have, in their party, like went up and checked out what was out here. And, we're a little bit higher up elevation wise. And so I wonder that. So the rivers were very important to where we grew up because we were always thinking about, at least I was, like, what kind of expeditions went down those rivers, stopped and maybe camped where I grew up, like years and hundreds of years before I lived in that area. Another thing that has to do with the rivers and living kind of in a river town is that at my first house in Florissant when I grew up, this was the house I grew up in from the time I was born until 6th grade, is that we had a creek that ran behind our house. It was called it still is called Coldwater Creek. Now it's very controversial nowadays. You can Google it, you can look it up. Coldwater Creek has been found, this is kind of scary, to the water that was in it. A lot of folks have been there's all kinds of studies going on, but a lot of people who have been exposed to the water in Coldwater Creek have developed all different kinds of cancers and all kinds of things like that. And I think from the research that I've done is that it has to do with actually we're close to where I live now, Weldon Spring, Missouri, during the Manhattan Project. They disposed of some nuclear waste, it got into the wastewater, and somehow it got into Coldwater Creek, something like that. So, anyway, Coldwater Creek ran, I mean, directly through my backyard as a kid. Okay, so, but this was in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. So, we were kids. We had a lot of, boys in the neighborhood that would all play together. And so what did we do? We played in the creek all the time as kids. In the summertime, I can tell you two creek stories. Again, these were tributaries that would lead to the rivers, right? I mean, this was a creek that was bigger as you went up the way, and it was a tributary of the Mississippi River. Eventually, you could follow it all the way to the river. But this creek, when we would get a really good rainstorm, Coldwater Creek actually ran through a driving range about 2 miles upriver or up creek from where we lived. There was a driving range next to the Schnucks grocery store. It was called T-Shots. And so this creek ran right through the middle of where you hit your golf balls at this driving range. And so obviously when you hit your golf balls, some of them would go right boom into the creek when you hit them. And I always thought that was weird that they didn't put some kind of a cover over the creek that went through the middle of the land where you hit your ball, or, because the balls, when they went in the creek, they were just gone. Right. And so every time it would pour, and every spring it would pour, March, April, May, we'd get the big rains, and the creek would rise. Now, the creek in my backyard, though, I'm not thinking of like dirt sides. Like, this was concrete sides on both sides, probably about 70-degree angles. It was tough to climb up, but we could always do it. But it was like really steep, concrete on the bottom. But when it would rain really hard, the creek would rise quickly. So most of the times the creek just had like a little, kind of trickle of water going through it. Like, there was crawdads down there, so we'd catch crawdads and stuff. But there was never it was never dangerous. There was never a lot of water in the creek. However, when you got a big rainstorm, the creek would come up to where if you went down in the creek, it'd be up to your knees. And I mean, that water would be raging. So I don't even know how my mom let us go out. We probably didn't even tell our parents. We probably just went back down into the creek and probably was scaring the crud out of our parents. We would go down there, and the thing was, so when the big rains came, it would flush all those golf balls out of the creek up at tee shots, and we would go down in the creek and we would get all the golf balls. So you would just see these golf balls like bobbing, like bobbers coming at you, and we would stand there and we'd catch them and put them in buckets, or we'd just take them and just throw them up into our backyards. And then what we would do is we put them in a bucket, and they let us hit them back into the driving range for free. We were idiots, right? I mean, they were scamming us. So we did all this work to get their golf balls back for them, and like, death defying storms, catching these golf balls. Probably, I mean, if we slipped, we'd probably get washed away down the river, and who knows where we would have ended up. But they got their golf balls back because we didn't have to pay to hit a bucket of balls. We hit them right back out into the range for them. They're probably like, man, this is the best deal ever. We used to do that all the time. Big rain, let's go to the creek. Let's get the balls. We'll put them in a bucket. We'll take them back up to tee shots. We'd ride our bike with the bucket, probably lose a couple on the way. And they'd give us a driver, and we'd hit the balls back at tee shots. So that was one of the things we did. In the wintertime, like right now, the creek would freeze over. We'd play hockey, and that would be fun. But again, it wasn't dangerous. It wasn't like playing hockey on a lake or a pond, because you wouldn't have a danger of falling through because the ice was only about a couple inches thick. I mean, it wasn't like a lake where there was water under it. It was just a little, thing of ice. And we wouldn't always, not everybody had hockey sticks. Some people play with brooms. I always had a hockey stick. We wouldn't always have skates. We just use our shoes sometimes. But man, we would be in that creek all the time. So that was kind of one of the things that I find interesting. And I'm glad that I grew up in an area where we have the four seasons. So in the summertime, where I grew up, it gets to be over 100 degrees in the summer here, no problem. In July, the heat index will get up to 110, 115 some days. It gets smoking hot. But in the wintertime, just like now, we'll have days where the wind chill will be 10 degrees below zero, 15, 20 degrees below zero. And we'll have stretches where lakes will freeze, ponds will freeze, and you can ice skate on ponds. And, you get basically a little taste of Canada for for a few weeks and then it goes away. But then we get the awesome spring weather, we get the awesome fall weather, we get the changing of the colors, we get all the buds and the green popping back out in March, April, and May. And then we get the awesome, awesome fall colors come like September and October here in the Midwest. So I'm very lucky to get to see all four seasons, that my kids have grown up and seen all four seasons. As much as I complain about why am I living in Missouri in January? I hate going out when it's this cold. I hate it. Like right now, as I'm recording this podcast, Riley's looking at me here in the studio, and I know I got to take her out for her afternoon walk. She's giving me those eyes like it's time to go for my walk. It's time to take care of business, and I know we got to do it. But I know if I lived in Florida, I would just put on my sneakers and boom, we'd be outside. We'd be enjoying the day. It'd be 70 degrees. It'd be wonderful. I know that right now I got to go put on my sneakers. I got to put on a hat. I got to put on my balaclava. I got to put on gloves. Got to put on the big heavy coat, the hood, and then I'll still freeze while we're out there. But you know what? The geography of where I grew up kind of shaped me. I think I'm a little bit, maybe a little bit hardier because I've endured my entire life super cold weather, super hot weather. And I think maybe it makes you appreciate the like day where it's 75 with a nice breeze. I don't know. This is where I want your feedback because I want to hear about the geography of where you grew up. So I grew up in the Midwest where we get all four seasons. I grew up around rivers and lakes and in creeks. Okay, that was kind of a thing. But here's the thing: I never saw the ocean. I got to see it briefly when I was 12 for like an hour when we went down to spring training with my dad's buddy pitch for the Phillies, and we went down there. Got to see the ocean briefly then. I didn't get to see the ocean again until I was in my 20s. If you wonder why I love going on cruises so much right now at this point in my life, I could look at the ocean forever. The ocean is the most amazing thing to me because it's really kind of a foreign concept still at 48 years old in my life because I have spent so much of my life landlocked. I love looking at the Mississippi and the Missouri rivers, but they're just big brown rivers that most of the time don't have a whole lot of water in them anymore. Like when we pass over them on the bridges, they're not the most spectacular looking things like you see on Aerial America on the Smithsonian Channel or something like that. They don't look as beautiful as they do in National Geographic. They're beautiful. Don't get me wrong. I love when I go over the Missouri River at sunset here by the house when I'm taking Mallory to cheerleading. When I see a good sunset over the Missouri River as we're passing into St. Louis County, because Mallory cheers in St. Louis County, I still appreciate that. I still, thank God that I get to see sunsets over Missouri rivers. Like that's pretty neat. I'm blessed that I get to live in a place like that because it is beautiful. But then again, like I wonder if you grew up in a place that's on a coast, like if you grew up on the California coast, or you grew up on the Florida coast, or the Gulf Coast, or you grew up in New England, or you grew up in I don't know, what have you. You grew up near the ocean. Is that something that changed how you see the world? Is the ocean not a big deal to you? Because the ocean is like the most amazing thing to me, but I rarely get to see it. That's why I like going on cruises. And I love sea days. I could just look at that ocean forever. And I know it doesn't look that exciting. It's just a bunch of water. But man, I wonder like what's under me right now? Like, are there sharks under me right now? Is there a sunken ship under me right now? How deep is the ocean right now under me? What's the sea floor look like under me right now? Is it flat? Is it jagged? I love that stuff. I mean, I think that's part of, again, we kind of talked about this earlier in the show, but as a Disney fan, I think that not only do we believe in the good and we hope that the good will always prevail, but I think we're always curious too. And I think that's kind of what this is all about. I think where you grew up and your geography leads you to curiosity. Because I grew up in the Midwest and there were, Native Americans or First Nations people that had this land well before us. I wonder like what did those societies look like, not just in Missouri, but in like my backyard? Like, were there people on the land where my house sits or where I have my hammock in the backyard in the summer? Like, what did this particular piece of land, what's its history? If I could go back and trace that over the last 500, 1,000 years, what remarkable things took place on this land? Was it just buffalo land where they grazed? That'd be pretty cool even. But I would love to know that. And that's what my geography probably happened if I had to guess. Probably buffalo grazed in my backyard. Maybe kind of First Nations or Native Americans, had societies where I grew up. We're very close to Cahokia Mountains in Illinois, where there was a great society way back a long time ago. But I wonder about that. But what about you? Tell me about your geography because again, some of you guys live in places where the weather's great all year. And you don't have to go take the dog out in the 7-degree weather, which I'm getting ready to do. So you win there. But I think we all have little wins. I mean, you got to take the good and the bad, right? It makes life awesome. So let me know. Again, I love the feedback, but tell me, like I wouldn't want to give up those little hockey games in the creek with my buddies growing up. Like that was fun. In the memories of us bobbing for golf balls, as death defying as and stupid as that was, as like 9-year olds. I mean, it was just what we did. That's that's definitely a Florissant, Missouri thing. Like everybody in Florissant knew to do that. That's what we did. We went down and got golf balls from tee shots when it rained. But I mean, I bet you nowhere else in the country people thought that was sane or that was even a smart thing to do. So that's kind of just some of the stories, the geography, the part of the world that I grew up in led to some of the stories of my childhood and have kind of made me who I am today. And I appreciate the Four Seasons because I grew up in landlocked St. Louis, Missouri. So tell me about your part of the world. How did that change you? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of how maybe mountains or oceans or rivers or plains or any of that stuff has shaped you? I'd love to hear that for next week's show so we can share that. Because again, while this show is about the Midwest, I want it to be about all of us and about how we have similarities. We have more similarities than differences, but I do love the differences too because we can all learn from each other. So until we get back together again next week, I hope you have an awesome weekend. I hope you stay safe and I hope you stay warm wherever you are. I'll talk to you next week. Have a great one, everybody. Thank you so much for your support. So lucky, Corwin, getting to see the ocean, but I know it's just more water, but it's awesome. Oh my gosh, I love the ocean. All right, I'm going to get this on the feed. Thanks, guys, for being here.